Hey guys, let's get more news from Steelers, but first don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Steelers superlatives, it's time to start blaming the QB coach for Kenny Pickett's lack of production. Per usual, you've all excelled in proffering a wonderful assortment of takes here in the comment section at Behind the Steel Curtain. Here are some of the best, or most interesting, the audience had to offer ahead of Week 11's showdown against the Cleveland Browns. I have several theories about this. The first, and probably most correct, is that Steelers fans are spoiled rotten by success. I am squarely among this contingent. I'm 32, and in my lifetime, the Steelers have had only 4 losing seasons, 3 of which occurred before I was old enough to fully comprehend how football worked, and played in 3 Super Bowls, winning 2. That's a remarkable run of achievement, and one any fan of most other teams would welcome with gleeful enthusiasm. For Steelers fans, to complain about the state of a consistently prosperous franchise that currently sits at 6-3 is kind of like a straight-A student complaining about how dumb they are because they only got a 97 on their math test. Meanwhile, the kid in the back wearing the booger-stained Deshaun Watson jersey spelled their own name wrong. Another theory is that fatalism is inextricably linked to fandom, at least in the sense that assuming and expecting the worst dulls the pain when and if the worst ultimately comes to fruition, and that many fans, bloggers, etc. of other teams engage in the same kind of discourse. That said, the Steelers are unique in that I don't think it's necessarily fatalistic to conclude that their record probably belies how good they actually are. That much is largely self-evident in analyzing their metrics, namely, their negative 26 points differential, and, watching the games. Any misery that anyone is feeling about the current state of things is rooted in considering what ugly and logic-defying wins might portend, which in this case would be a regression toward the mean and another 9-8 season, or worse. And, honestly, it's hard to argue with the rationality of that mindset. My counterpoint, in this made-up argument that I'm having with myself, would be that fandom is inherently irrational and that it is good to simply enjoy things. Keep in mind, too, that misery loves company and that articles decrying the Steelers will invariably do better numbers than rosier dispatches about how great it is that Kenny Pickett isn't turning the ball over. Vox's executives need their bills paid somehow. I think someone else who needs to start shouldering some blame is QB coach Mike Sullivan. It is evident that Kenny hasn't taken the next step for whatever reason, but that falls on all 3, for if you include Tomlin, parties. We are so quick to throw blame at the OC, DC, O-line coach, DB's coach, etc., but I never hear us throwing blame at QB coach who is working directly with Pickett. I wonder how much of Canada now being on the sideline is a lack of trust that Sullivan is actually helping Pickett in game. BMP 2108, you're telling me there's a second Mike Sullivan at whom I can direct my animus and condemnation when the local sports team underperforms? Bliss. This is a profoundly interesting point that I genuinely never considered before I read this comment. My understanding is that coordinators like Matt Canada are tasked with devising and implementing game plans, plays, etc., whereas individual position coaches handle more of the day-to-day minutiae like reviewing film, orchestrating drills, polishing fundamentals, etc. While it is fair to criticize Canada's schematics for failing to get the most out of Pickett within the context of the offense's framework, it isn't like Pickett is struggling merely with tactics. Indeed, Pickett's problems this season have been manifold, and mechanical issues like pocket presence, footwork, and timing are the sorts of kinks that a position coach should be reasonably tasked with ironing out, both during the week and in-game. So yeah, Sullivan probably should be catching more flack. James Harrison and Roger Goodell represent the perfect example of a workplace dynamic going to shit. Employee severely breaks the rules by repeatedly engaging in illegal hits. Bossman lays down the punishment of hefty fines, leaving the employee to respond with an extremely pointed threat that he would rather let the commissioner burn than take the opportunity to piss on him to put out the flames. And that's just one of the many menacing remarks. In other words, it's a surefire recipe for beef. But pinning blame to the offensive coordinator isn't a uniquely Pittsburgh thing. The Bills just handed walking papers to Ken Dorsey, an adept play caller who prior to this season looked to be on the fast track toward a head coaching gig. It isn't uncommon for bad teams to terminate lame duck coaches in season, but for a presumed soup. Steelers coach suffers brutal injury after sideline collision. Pittsburgh Steelers special teams coach Danny Smith found himself a bit too close to the action at the end of Sunday's win over the Green Bay Packers. As time expired, Steelers safety Damontae Kazee intercepted a Jordan Love pass in the end zone and ran out of bounds after the clock hit 0. A late hit from Packers offensive lineman Zach Tom sent Kazee barreling into the 70-year-old Smith and led to a post-game scuffle between the teams. Smith tore his right rotator cuff in 3 places due to the hit and will need surgery to repair it, per ESPN. Smith has been with the Steelers since 2013. Before that, he was the special teams coach for the Washington Commanders and Buffalo Bills. He also spent time with the Philadelphia Eagles, Detroit Lions, and Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. It's not the first time Smith has been injured, as he explained. "I've been hit a lot, and been hit hard. I got a lot of metal in my body over that. I got to learn to get the hell out of the way," Smith said, before outlining some of his previous injuries. "I got hit in college in a Clemson-Georgia Tech game. Got a tibial plateau fracture, got a plate and 6 screws in my knee. I had that hit at training camp with Antonio Brown when I broke my ribs and my L1 vertebrae in my back. This one hurt. I got a torn rotator cuff, 3 spots." Steelers tight end Rodney Williams recognized Smith was injured and moved him to safety as the fight started around him. "He was trying to scoot out of there, but he couldn't really move for real, so I just had to get my dog up out of the pile," Williams said. Falcons rumor, QB Kirk Cousins to sign with Atlanta as free agent? The NFL present for quarterback Kirk Cousins? His Minnesota Vikings season is over as he rehabs from injury and looks forward to being a 2024 free agent. But his future? ESPN insiders have launched a guessing game, with Dan Graziano and Jeremy Fowler predicting the veteran quarterback will be elsewhere next year. Elsewhere, as maybe with the Atlanta Falcons? "I've started asking teams about this, and Atlanta comes up fairly often," claims Fowler. "The Falcons have improved their roster and need a quarterback to bring it all together. Cousins would find comfort in Atlanta's talented roster of playmakers, similar to what he had in Minnesota. The chance to win is there." We must note, this all sounds like a guess, and Fowler is essentially admitting that when he says he is asking teams about this. Because of course, what other teams think in the middle of November 2023 about what might unfold in the middle of 2024 seems pretty immaterial to us. Having said that, is there logic to the idea? It would mean giving up on Desmond Ridder as a starter, of course. It would mean reliance on Cousins, who will turn 36 in August, and it will mean paying him a top-of-the-market deal. ESPN points out that Atlanta has ample cap space. But that doesn't mean this is the way it should be spent. Nor do we know if the Vikings and Cousins want a divorce, a decision that might be influenced by what newly signed Josh Dobbs does at the position down the stretch. We do know that Cousins, back when he was negotiating with the Vikings, wanted a longer-term deal than Minnie was willing to give, seemingly sensible, given his age. Indeed, there is so much unknown here. Is Arthur Smith still the Falcons coach in 2024? That this is truly little more than a premature parlor game. All in all, this is yet another piece that is more rumor than report, with nothing much to substantiate it, leaving it for Falcons fans to debate in bars and barbershops. Are these Falcons suddenly a substantially more viable playoff contender if 36-year-old Kirk Cousins is their quarterback? And you fan, what do you think of the Kirk Cousins situation? Leave your opinion in the comments.